Here to review all the weekend's biggest action is Ian O'Neill and Harry Powell on the Balance Breakdown.
You know what time it is. It's time to put some balance back into your lives. Myself and Harry Powell are here in the flesh. Harry, I want to say this is your first podcast as a married man. Is that correct? Or did Shawnee nab you before me?
No, that's correct. I don't speak to Shawnee until so yeah.
A massive congratulations to yourself and Imogen. We had a little conversation about it all off camera, but I'm glad you had a great time and glad it was a couple of days to remember. And congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
We are back to talk about UFC 289 from Vancouver, BC. I was there in person, in the flesh, had a great time mixing it up. Brilliant to meet Spencer in person. He treated me like a king over there. The king of Saskatchewan met the king of BC, and they both looked after each other, and more so Spencer looking after me for the week. So I appreciate that. It was great to see him. Great to be there in person. Pretty surreal experience for myself, but we did it. We put SevereMMA up there on the big stage, and we didn't do too bad at all. It was a great event overall. It was a memorable event where we've seen lots of breakout stars. We've seen somewhat of a resurgence in Canadian mixed martial arts. We've seen one of the greatest fighters of all time hang up their gloves after a tremendous career. We saw a legend of the lightweight division put himself back into the mix, and we're going to break it all down all around now. Harry, how are you and how did you find this event, looking at it? Well, share perspectives from being there in person as we go along this conversation, and I'll get your thoughts as well. What was your thoughts watching on the event? It was a pretty good card from top to bottom.
My initial thoughts on the card was how proud I was of you. So let's start there. This is something that you've built up to over the last 2 to 3 years working with Severe. Obviously, you being out in Canada, you get far less cards, far less exposure. You could have done a ton of Cage Warriors cards if you were back home, but obviously you're out running things in Saskatchewan like the great man that you are. And to see you embrace Fight Week the way that you did, to see some of the content that came out from you, some of the questions that you asked, both pre-fight and post-fight, it was just so incredibly heartwarming and wholesome to see you get some of the rewards for the work that you've put in over the last while. And I speak for everyone at Severe when we all thank you for the work that you've put in, and thank you for showing so well what we as an organization stand for, but also for yourself, right? You took Olivia out with you, had a great time all round. Obviously you met Big ESK, but for the most part, I'm proud that you embraced the week as well as you did, and that it garnered the results that it did. So that's how I found the card to begin with, but we'll move on. I think the easiest way I can sum this up is this was Canada's UFC London in May last year. That's what it was.
Yeah.
We had a couple of guys who, okay, it may not be the biggest amount of jeopardy in a fight. And by that, I mean the Marc-Andre Barrios and in some aspects, the Mike Malots. In some aspects, Eamon Zahabi, Carl Nelson. You're never going to see Eamon Zahabi or Carl Nelson fight for a title. You may see Marc-Andre Barrios fight for the title, but that's just middleweight, right? Whatever. But to me, in the same vein for the London card back in May last year, it actually didn't matter because this card was about the Canadian people and about the Canadian fans. And I think Spencer and I had a conversation today, a little earlier today, just about sort of why is it we look at some cards and we say, oh, I don't really like this card. And then you look at another card of quote unquote similar quality on paper in terms of rankings or unrankings or whatever. And we say, well, we like this card. Like, I like this. This is good. Elements of it are matchmaking. Elements of it are storylines that are obvious to us. But I also think it's about storylines and offerings that the card has to the place with which it's being situated. And when you go to London once a year, or seemingly now twice a year for the UFC, or you go to Canada once every fucking 7 years, as it has been, it really means something. It really means something to the people. It really means something to the local fighters. And it really means something to the media that are covering these events. And sort of that's just how it felt. And I think you did a great job of allowing us to live that fight week vicariously through you. But going through the card, you sort of felt the momentum build a little as the Canadians kept winning, as the Canadians kept looking good in their winning. It just felt like everything came to a head with Mike Malott. And it was difficult for me to really hear it, like the fan perception, the crowd perception, when you are watching an event, not there in the arena, is really hard to tell. But it sounded like the roof went off for Mike Malott.
It did. I'll share my experience from the very start, and that was the media day on Wednesday. And there was some complaints about this card. I mean, I'm not one that's going to just go out there and, like, some cards are like, we'll say here that we can only say what we feel. And I was always excited for this card because obviously I was going out there. I think a lot of the arguments came from the fact it was a pay-per-view card, and on paper, you know, it might not have met the standards of pay-per-views when you are expecting people to pay that money to watch the pay-per-views. Yeah, you want a little bit of name value, and that's understandable. But we were only about one fight away from it being that. And that fight was Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Michel Pereira that got pulled from the card. So if that didn't happen, you know, hindsight is a great thing. If that didn't happen, we might not have got the magic that we did get, because you said the card built on the night, but the card was building in Vancouver for the whole week. And it started on the media day. You know, we got some great kind of interviews in with it, but it was Mike Malott that kind of stood out to me. And I spoke with Spencer. It was like the way he came in, the way he presented himself, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself off camera, how assertive he was on the microphone. It really, like, I left there and I had said to Spencer, I was like that was Mike Malott's day. That this is shaping up to be Mike Malott's card. Same on the press conference. He soaked in the crowd. He reacted to the crowd. He got the crowd going. The crowd got behind him, which was brilliant to see. I was unsure. Canadian crowds are strange, man. You know, I heard Spencer speaking about it, and he spoke very well about it before, and he was right in everything that he said about Canadian crowds and getting behind their own. I've even gone to concerts and other things over here where, you know, it's not quite like home, where the crowds are getting into it even a lot more. We've had bands try and say, come on, let's get going and get the crowd going, where it's a little bit more difficult to do so maybe than in Ireland or the UK or some other places that have been to see gigs. That wasn't a fucking problem on Saturday night, nor was it at the press conference, nor was it at the weigh-ins on Friday either. It was this anticipation. And you know what? We can say what we like about the UFC as an organization for good things and for bad things, but after witnessing it firsthand this week, the staff that are involved with the UFC run such a tight ship. They are unbelievable. They cater to all of your needs as a media person. They make sure that you're getting everything that you need when it comes to sound quality, understanding what's happening, you know, so much as to make sure you get questions in at the media day. They're passionate, they're friendly. And that experience for me accelerated my excitement for the card. Like, I mean, I could have went home Friday after the weigh-ins and I would have been happy and content. And I was like coming in on Saturday, and I think the first thing I might have said to Spencer or something was like, I've had such a great week so far, and I haven't even seen the fights yet. Like, I mean, we haven't even, that was the fun part. We're getting into fucking see these fights, and going back talking about Mike Malott's week, it was like, this is it. Like, and we all said this was his week. He met it, but he had to go in there and he had to get the job done. But we'll talk about his fight a little bit with Amanda Nunes. We'll talk about the main event first. With Amanda Nunes coming in there, she presented herself really well. She spoke really well on the media day. And like I said, hindsight is a great thing now. Obviously, she had in the back of her mind her plans coming in here, but I got that sense from her, the way she was speaking, a couple of things that I've seen on the embedded, and the only person that can vouch for me, and I didn't want to put it out there, didn't want to put that energy out there before, but I said it to Olivia on Thursday night when I was over there. I said, I think Amanda Nunes is going to retire tomorrow. Or I said on Friday night, I think Amanda Nunes is going to retire tomorrow. I just have that feeling there. And lo and behold, she went out there and put on that performance, and she presented herself very well. The way she spoke before, during the fight, put on a show to the best of her abilities. And then after the fact as well, just soaked in that retirement. And you could see that kind of the happiness and kind of the weight lifted off her shoulders when it was all said and done as well. And, you know, the accumulation of all of that, being able to witness that, to be involved in fight week with what would be Amanda Nunes' last fight week and last fight. I mean, put the cherry on the top of the cake for me to be able to be there and witness it in person and pay homage to her and pay her the respect that she deserves for how important she has been in development of mixed martial arts and the development of women's mixed martial arts as well. And I don't like to separate the two of them. You know, I think, you know, when I introduced Amanda Nunes as the greatest fighter of all time, I think that's how she should be. Obviously, you know, there's nothing wrong with the label of the greatest women's fighter of all time, ever, without question of anybody else. But I think you can kind of put her under the same umbrella as other great fighters and what she's done, what she's achieved in the sport, how she's carried herself, and the way she went out on the absolute top of her game as well. Was just really, really, really special to see. I mean, I was trying to kind of label and kind of maybe mention something why Amanda Nunes was so important to mixed martial arts and then maybe especially to women's mixed martial arts. You know, we had Ronda, we had the success of Ronda, and we had the stardom of Ronda, but Amanda Nunes came in as alongside probably Cyborg, who wasn't in the UFC at the time, but she probably came in with the most well-rounded set of skills where, you know, we had the conversation about having your base set of skills, whereas I think Amanda Nunes transcended and set the bar for women in mixed martial arts, coming in with that well-roundedness and showcasing that well-roundedness in her stint in the UFC. And topped it off with some fantastic knockout power as well, and some scary knockout power that we hadn't really seen too much in the women's mixed martial arts before that, apart from, like I mentioned, Cyborg as well. She has to be mentioned. So I don't know if it's fully hit home for me what I've experienced yet. It's still pretty raw, but it was a fantastic week, fantastic experience. And, you know, thank you for the kind words at the start of the podcast as well. It meant more to me to be able to do that than I can ever describe, and the experience was more than I ever could imagine. And hopefully it's not the last time, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. But I'm not sure if you have anything to come in on top of that, but maybe we can talk about the fights. We can talk about Nunes after the fights. I mean, I'll hand it over to you. If you take it in whatever direction you'd like to take it, Harry.
I think we can sort of encapsulate everything as we go, right? I think you said there, how do you try and sum up Amanda Nunes' career? And I think for me, Amanda showed that modern MMA transcends everything. You have Ronda Rousey, who obviously fantastic judoka, great arm bars, and just a solid ground game. You had a Kat Zingano, who was fine on the feet, right? A little bit of wrestling. You had a Misha Tate, who was has a double leg, but likes boxing. And then you had the Holly Holm, who was, you know, the striker lady. But you also had the Jermaine Durandamy, but you also had Cyborg. Now, Cyborg was just the big, scary, big hitter that had a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But Amanda came in and said, well, this is what happens if you have ferocious power. This is what happens if you can box a little bit. This is what happens if you can wrestle really well. This is what happens if you have a top game. This is what happens if you have a bottom game. She had, for my money, she's the first elite level MMA fighter from a completely well-rounded perspective. Because you could say, and you can argue, Chris Cyborg obviously had certain talents. Ronda Rousey had catastrophically high skills in certain areas. But there has not been, until Amanda Nunes, a fighter, and again, we can argue Valentina Shevchenko for sure.
And that came after, though. I think it was at the time, I think, is what I was trying to say. And I think that's what you're trying to explain as well, is when she came and kind of, she was there and she was performing well, but like obviously the breakout performance came against Miesha Tate in UFC 200, where she picked up the title. And it was a different level of performance than we'd ever seen from a woman inside of the octagon. And I hate saying it like that, because I don't know, it shouldn't be labeled like that, but that's the fact of the matters of what it was. It's, we talked about the different levels in skill set and development between men's mixed martial arts and women's mixed martial arts. And there is still a little bit of a lag in women's mixed martial arts when it does come to the skill discrepancy. But I think Amanda Nunes was the first person to kind of transcend that skill set to one base level to a well-rounded athlete that we're seeing in there.
I agree. I agree 100%. And that for Amanda Nunes' legacy is going to have a greater effect than any belt, any knockout, any submission, because there has to be the first mover. And the first mover for women's MMA was Amanda Nunes. And now, when you look at the 15, 16, 17-year-old kid who's training mixed martial arts, girl, whatever, that's training mixed martial arts, and there's a fighter that they would like to emulate, it's Amanda Nunes. Because they realize, or Valentina Shevchenko, but, the similar thing. Because look, we had Amanda Nunes, well, then Valentina comes in, and then a Weili Zhang comes in, and then a Rose Namajunas comes in. And we have this influx of the elite level of mixed martial arts at the 135, 125, 115 pound divisions for women. It follows the trajectory that we've seen with men, which is the commonality is well-roundedness. And when you look at Irene Aldana, I think the thing that you see, and we can go back and forth about the development and the evolution of female MMA, and actually, I think that's fine, a fine conversation to have. But what we saw was exactly the thing that we're praising Amanda Nunes for, is Irene Aldana did not know how to deal or did not have an answer for Amanda Nunes' modern MMA. That's what we saw.
100%. 100%. The occasion, I feel, did get to her a little bit, but what I think was disregarded in that fight is what happened in about the first 2.5 minutes of the first round, Harry. And that was what we seen from Amanda was multiple stance switches, teeps to the body, jabs, big right hands, shots to the body, spinning attacks, spinning elbows. She showed Irene Aldana almost her full toolbox in the first couple of minutes of that fight. And that was all to confuse her. She was standing in front of her for all the face-offs all week in the southpaw stance, and she came out orthodox. And I was wondering, I was like, is she trying to play games here? And that's what Amanda Nunes was trying to do. She was trying to play games all week with Irene Aldana, and it definitely worked, because look at the Irene Aldana that we've seen in there was not the best version of Irene Aldana. It was a person who was new to the occasion, and she kind of got swallowed up a little bit. But that's not to the fault of Amanda Nunes, who did go out there and put on a show and was counting on Irene Aldana to come back at her. And you could see every time that she did, she was smiling, she was embracing it. But I mean, it was a disappointing performance overall from Aldana. Maybe talk to me about what Amanda Nunes did, maybe kind of expand a little bit more, maybe on what I was saying, and maybe give me your counter argument on what Irene Aldana was kind of trying to figure out and failed to do so on the night as well.
So I actually, I don't know that I have that much criticism for Irene Aldana. And the reason for that is because when it comes to mixed martial arts, everything is dilemmas, right? We've talked about this ad nauseum before. When you're stood in front of Amanda Nunes, and I think this is the only tangible that I'll give the occasion gets to Aldana rhetoric, is I think in a similar way to Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz, you've watched this fighter for a considerable amount of time. This fight has played out in your head thousands and thousands of times. You've watched his fights and the tape on him hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Fine. For Irene Aldana, I feel like that is probably the case for Amanda Nunes in her perspective. But there's a choice. And the choice is when you get in front of that fighter and that fighter is there for real and they stand in front of you in the southpaw and that right hand is as close to your jaw as you'd like it. There's a question you ask yourself, right? And it's, am I ready for this? Has those thousands of hours of visualization, has those thousands of hours of tape watching and dreaming and all of this stuff, has that put me in a situation where I am actually available and present to go and enact the thing that I've been trying to do for X amount of years? And for Irene Aldana, the answer was no. And that's fine. You know, we can critique her from a sporting perspective, obviously. It means that she wasn't ready for the title shot, and that's fine. It's not a problem. But for the performance itself and for what she did or didn't do, I just think Amanda took everything away from her. Everything. In the preview show, you guys were talking about the fight, and what I would have said if I was there was Aldana needs to set a pace, but she needs to set a pace with feints and using the range, using the long left hand as an ability to ward away Amanda from building up steam of her own. But Amanda just didn't give her a chance to set any form of rhythm whatsoever. Like you said, the Arsenal, almost the entire Arsenal came out inside the first 2.5 minutes. The stance switching, I'll talk about footwork all day, but the stance switching is the cornerstone of everything. Because if you don't know what stance your opponent is going to stand in and going to set their feet in to throw shots, it's very, very hard for you to pick what tools of your own arsenal you're going to bring to the fight. Because as we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast before, the different stances allow different advantages, but also have different disadvantages you're going to need to be aware of depending on what you're doing with your feet. And so Nunes switching all of the time, going to the body. What does the body do? It brings down the hands. The low kicks, what do the low kicks do? Well, they allow high kicks to come at another time, and we saw those. The spinning attacks, well, what do they offer? Well, that means that not only have you got to worry about the stance switching for stance switching, well, a stance switch could also be the setup to a spinning attack. So what do I do? Well, I'm going to back away slightly. I'm going to slightly become more defensive because I've seen straights, I've seen overhand rights, I've seen leaping left hooks, I've seen ducking uppercuts to my liver, I've seen straight shots to the sternum, I've seen straight shots to my abdomen, I've been teeped halfway across the cage 4 times, and we've been here for 2.5 minutes. And I have 23 minutes left of this. And so Aldana is so overwhelmed cerebrally in those 2.5 minutes. Amanda just does what she wants. And we haven't even gotten to the grappling parts yet.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was like on top of everything else, she was throwing takedowns in as well to keep. It was like a masterful game plan from Amanda Nunes. It was unbelievable. Talk about the teeps to the body at the early stages of the fight. What that does is it also drains the gas tank of Irene Aldana as well. So if Aldana was coming into this, which maybe a lot of fighters would plan on do against Amanda Nunes, because one of the, I'll put this in inverted commas, one of the weaknesses of Amanda Nunes would be that she loses a bit of steam. Her gas tank goes towards the end of fights. But if you don't have the gas in your tank to push that pace later on in the fight, well, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. And Amanda Nunes ensured that Irina Aldana was not going to have that too. And the utilization of those teep kicks to the body and the odd shot to the body as well with her hands, that kind of took away the gassing, because we seen Irina, and I was looking at her in between rounds, and I saw her when she was coming out, and like for the first 20-30 seconds at the start of every round, you could see her. She was moving quicker on her feet. She was trying to get her shots off quicker. She wobbled her at the end of the first round as well, which must have been a confidence booster. But anytime she got a bit of confidence, Amanda Nunes took that away from her. Just immediately took that away from her. And I think it was just an accumulation where Amanda Nunes just stayed chipping away at, number one, her physical abilities, but also her mental abilities. And Amanda won the physical battle. She also won the mental battle in there as well. And geez, I couldn't say enough good things. If that is a way to leave the octagon, what a way to go out. Just come, okay, she didn't get the finish. So fucking what? So what? Irina Aldana is tough as they come. One thing we cannot discredit is Irina Aldana's chin and her heart, because she was a woman in there that had lots of questions and no answers, and she just kept on plodding forward. She could have took the easy way out, and we've seen fighters take the easy way out before. She didn't. She stayed going. It wasn't the best performance from her, but it was a learning performance for Irina Aldana. And now we get the luxury of seeing her maybe come back and fight once more, fight twice more, and see if she can make her way back into title shot again and learn from those mistakes. And, you know, obviously it won't be Amanda Nunes the next time when if she does get that opportunity as well.
I think it's very rare that we get fairy tales in MMA. Very, very rare. But it's also very rare, I think, that we see performances from fighters that transcend what we thought was possible. And like, I don't mean that Amanda didn't do anything so drastic that we've never seen before, but it just felt like when she walked into the octagon, you'd said it all week. I'd kind of noticed it in certain interviews. I asked you, how did Amanda look? Because in the two Juliana Pena performances, Amanda felt shaky just in her person. She didn't feel like the Amanda Nunes that we'd gotten used to as this greatest of all time, double champion, destroyer, disaster for any fighter that was signing on the line to get in the cage with her. But you were telling me, and it sort of came across in the interview, she felt assured, she felt calm, she had her family around her. Is that because she knew that this was the last one and she wanted to soak it all in? Yeah. Is that because it's the last one, it kind of doesn't mean anything because there's not going to be another one? So if you lose, well, fuck it, I lost.
But you also have the freedom of that decision as well, Harry. You know what I mean? Whereas and she had mentioned about Juliana Pena and just, you know, there's a lot less baggage in this Irina Aldana fight because there's not going to be shit talk, and she was getting the respect that she deserved as well from Irina. And look, at obviously the rivals, I don't mind. Juliana Pena can say her thing and whatever, but that's what I got. It was like, I don't think that she was enjoying herself. Obviously, it definitely wasn't in the first fight with Juliana Pena, obviously with a lot of problems that she had, and then the pressure of that defeat and having to come back and dealing with the shit talk then in the second fight. But if there was a way to go out, and if she could have dreamed of a way to leave this sport, I don't think she would have constructed that dream 5 or 10 years ago in her own head on how she did it and how everything kind of transpired as the week went on. You know, everything aligned perfectly. And I could get that vibe. She looked in phenomenal shape. She was in good spirits. And I mean, for me, it was very cool to kind of look, we all get to see what people are like on the mic and on camera when the lights are shining on them. But I had a little bit of insight of seeing fighters walk around off camera, and you could see that she was in that positive mentality. She was in that positive mindset. She wanted to be there. She was hungry to perform, and she was hungry to put a nice feather on many feathers on her cap to finish off her career as well with a good performance and a good win. Like, I mean, there are criticisms of Amanda Nunes saying that, yes, she is past probably her best, but I don't think that you could consider that she's fallen off a cliff with the performance that we've seen in the cage there on Saturday night. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I think that there are a couple of points to note here too. And that's that Amanda Nunes went out on one of the better performances of her career. Okay, you're not going to top the Cyborg performance. You're not. I think that's the greatest performance of her career. But there are performances, even in the Jermaine Durandamy performance, there were moments when Jermaine Durandamy was threatening triangles and all this sort of stuff. And you're like, oh, Jesus, I don't know. If Jermaine Durandamy is, catching you in submissions from the bottom, that's something to worry about. But there was not really any moment in this where Irene Aldana looked like she had a word in edgeways. It didn't look like the tide was turning ever. It didn't look like Amanda Nunes was giving up any space. It just felt on the night like you could have put anyone in there and Amanda Nunes was not going to lose. And so to the point about past the prime, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, she's a mother. She's a family woman. She's moved teams, moved camps, reallocated resources in her life, and she's in her late 30s. What do we expect? But I think what's smart from Amanda Nunes is maybe coming from the Juliana Pena performances where they didn't go how she wanted them. Even the second fight didn't go how she wanted.
Yeah.
And she's like, right, I think I've got one more here. I've got one more where I'm going to put everything into this. And then whatever happens, I know I'm not the same fighter that I was 5 years ago. And so why bother? And if that's the case, obviously I've not spoken to her and, maybe there'll be a couple of interviews as she heads off into retirement. But I would love somebody to ask that question as to what fueled the retirement. And did those two performances against Juliana Pena fuel that sort of retirement decision? Because if it did, that's incredibly smart because you sign off on top in front of adoring fans.
She mentioned at the post-fight press conference that it was an accumulation of a lot of things. It was first thing, and I think the main thing was the decision came. Look, she's not going to come out there and say that I felt that my skills were diminishing. Like, I think, it's fair to kind of come to that assessment, not right away. Are we going to hear those comments from her? But maybe subconsciously she did. And you can feel it in there if you are a fighter as well. But she did say her commitment to the sport. She left Brazil when she was a young 20-year-old woman. She hasn't been home that much. She kind of cited that she's sick of losing weight. She's like, I don't want to lose weight anymore. She just wants to enjoy her life. She wants to be her mother. She wants to spend time in Brazil, and she wants to give the opportunities for young up and comers. Like, it's a gym that she'll invite new young athletes there too. And it seems that I was going to ask that question, but somebody else got there ahead of me. It's not it for her in mixed martial arts in general. She wants to continue coaching. She wants to build the next generation of fighters as well. But I would definitely agree with you too, Harry, in that, you do get the sense when you're not able to get the same capabilities out of your body. You're not able to push as much or get as motivated as much to fight anymore as you used to when you're young and hungry and you didn't have anything. She has it all. She has all the records. She has the money. She has the belts. She has the defenses. She has the performances. And she has the notoriety to call it a day. And I think it was the perfect decision for her. Like you said, we don't get any fairy tales in mixed martial arts, barely ever. And this was a true fairy tale for Amanda Nunes. Now, look, we've gone on a bit. We can talk about the future of the bantamweight division probably on another day, but we've gone 30 minutes in. We've got to scoot down. We've lots to discuss on this card. And Charles Oliveira, or Oliveira, is the one that we are going to talk about next. And I mean, what can we say about Charlie? I mean, it's like this guy just beggars belief sometimes. I mean, I have witnessed him fight live on a couple of different occasions now, and he's always fell short. What I seen was a different man this week. This is the new and improved Charles Oliveira that we've seen over the last couple of years. He just had a blip in the radar against Islam, which can happen. You're losing to Islam Makhachev. Fucking hell, anyone can do that. But what Charles proved tonight is that he still has the heart and the drive to compete against the elite level competition and to get him back to where he wants to be. And that's to be the champion again. And that's the challenge Islam Makhachev. And I think it can't be understated how difficult of a task he had in front of him on Saturday night in Beneil Dariush, and how well he handled that occasion. And I went and I was talking to Spencer after the fight, and it might seem like such an easy comment to make with a guy who has accumulated the most bonuses in UFC history and accumulated the most finishes in UFC history. But I don't think I've seen a fighter ever with the same level of killer instinct to hurt a fighter and finish a fighter than I've seen in Charles Oliveira. And I'm wondering what you think about his performance and that statement in particular.
I think I agree wholeheartedly that there's not many fighters who, you know, there are a number of fighters, even on this card, they hurt their man and they fuck it up. And what I mean by that, they may even get the finish, right? But they delay, or they think too much, or they're hesitant, or they're not quite sure where to put their feet, or what shots to pick, or whether to take the fight down, or whatever it is. Charlie Olives is just a different breed. If he has you hurt, you're fucked. There is just nothing that you can do about it. And I think in a lot of ways, fighters know that. And so there is a hesitancy to fighting Charles Oliveira. And that also allows him a level of freedom. Now, in other fights, we've seen that level of freedom with which he fights in can be his Achilles heel, because he has been hittable. He is hittable. And I think when you get to that position where you can be hit, you can be touched, and maybe you're a little bit too free with your game plan and you're fighting the elite of the elite, bad stuff can happen, right? This is MMA, whatever. But I think that the margin for error, if you're a Charles Oliveira opponent, is so small. So small that Beneil Dariush made one mistake. It was one foot placement mistake. He gets clipped, the high kick comes in, and it's over. It's absolutely over. Oliveira puts his feet in all of the perfect places, lands the right shots, and doesn't take the fight down and stall his man. The takedown comes quick, and the shots come quick too. And I don't think the Islam Makhachev fight goes much different to the first time. It may be a closer battle, but I don't think that the winner necessarily changes.
Yeah.
But fuck me, if you want to put yourself in the window for getting back into that title shot, not just beating a man like Beneil Dariush, and let's just spend a couple of seconds talking about him.
Well, let's finish with Charlie, and we'll finish with Beneil too and his situation after that. I agree with what your assessment is on the Islam fight. I think that Charlie Olives, he deserves the chance to at least get back there, to prove it to himself. I found it very strange how he handled whenever anybody brought up that fight in the media day. He didn't want to talk about it. He said he never looked at it before, said it wasn't him. And I found that a little bit strange. Like, I don't like to see that denial. I think, you need to be accepting to what happens, no matter what happens in your life, you know what I mean? And pulling the wool over your eyes over anything, I don't think is a good thing. But you know what? He went out and he did what he did. I wanted to ask you about his defense off the back. He appeared to be using the X guard when Beneil got him on top. It was right in front of me on Media Row, and I was just like, oh, I'm like literally 10 yards away from grappling gods here now, and we're getting to see it. Just getting to see it playing like right in front of me was amazing. I think that Charles did so well defending an elite level grappler like Beneil in using his guard and also landing damage. Could you kind of talk me through that sequence and what impressed you the most out of that?
So one of the things that I love about Charles Oliveira's guard is his use of leg attacks, not necessarily to finish them, right? I think attacking the legs in MMA to finish isn't the smartest way to go about it, mostly because you're going to give your center line in some fashion. And a lot of the times when you're finishing leg locks, you want a bend in the leg, and well, the bend in the leg means you're in punching range, and that's never really the right answer, But What I love about Oliveira is the leg attacks take away the base of a fighter. A leg attack generally means a fighter has to either transfer weight to another leg, or they have to, in some fashion, roll through. And that gives you opportunities for get-ups, for back attacks, or for sweeps. Excellent. Using leg attacks in those scenarios for Charles Oliveira works, has worked, will work in the future. Beneil Dariush's ability to shut those down and force Charles to go to like a B game of his grappling was really, really interesting. But Charles used a mixture of X guard, single leg X, and then the up kicks to really show Dariush that you don't really want to come down here because there's the leg entanglements and everything else that we have offering. But I'm going to keep you at a distance, where Beneil was focusing so much on keeping his balance and then not getting kicked in the head that he wasn't able to pass like you would expect in a sport grappling match. He wasn't even able to contain grips for significant periods of time on Charles's legs because he was consistently being off balanced. The close guard work, I mean, whatever. We didn't see enough of that really to write home about anything. But we've watched Beneil Dariush go through good grapplers before. And to see the level, this was the question I had. The question I had was, what happens if Oliveira's on his back and Dariush is looking to pass, looking to implement his own grappling styles, looking to be heavy on top? And I was blown away by how well Oliveira's guard held up to Beneil Dariush on top. I wish I was you. Let me put it that way. I wish I was you 10 yards away watching it live, because I did not expect it to be that one-sided in the grappling department.
Nor did I, to be honest. And that's why I was interested to speak with you, because look, we talked about mental battles in the main event. Well, when that happened and Charles came away relatively unscathed and worked himself into a position where he was almost landing more damage off his back, that must have been a killer blow to Beneil Dariush's kind of mental capacity, in thinking that, I asked him that question. I asked Beneil before the fight, if he was to pinpoint any areas where he felt that he was going to be completely better. He said he said his basics was going to kind of combat the erratic style of Charles, and he also felt the wrestling and the grappling that he was going to be stronger there. When you feel that and then it doesn't materialize that way, well, then you're just after losing an avenue to find yourself a victory there, and that must be soul crushing to be in there. And it was the beginning of the end. Charles got up, landed the kick again, got there, and like that killer instinct, his calmness in the killer instinct, his position of the knee to control the hip of Beneil Dariush so Beneil couldn't hip out away from the strikes, I thought was excellent as well. And when you have a fighter hurt and your adrenaline is rushing, like the level of calmness shows how experienced he is in there inside that octagon, where he knows where he has to have that knee situated to control the posture of Beneil so he can get off his strikes. I just thought it was absolutely excellent. Charles Oliveira was an honorary Canadian man in there. The crowd were going nuts for him all week and all of the events, and the place was electric when he got that win. And you could see how overcome with emotion he was after the fight. It was just, look, at whatever happens down the line and whatever we think happens, if that Islam rematch happens, I'm very happy that Charles Oliveira got that moment and got that love. I think like what hit him most was the fact that he was receiving that love. I think I even remember him saying it, whether it was his post-fight speech or in the press conference after it, he was like, this isn't even Brazil. And I got the love that I got. So, that's what it meant. It meant a hell of a lot. But like you said, let's talk about Beneil Dariush, because, unfortunately in this game, for everybody's positives, there's always negatives for the opponent, for the guy who doesn't get his hand lifted. And there's something that is going to like ingrained into my mind and that I seen, and I made sure that I watched it as well, because we can all get caught up in the excitement and the wonders of a finish of a fight and watch the fighter celebrating. I made sure that I watched Beneil Dariush walk out of the octagon and walk back to his locker room, because that's what we need to remember in this game as well. There's a lot of joy, but there's also a lot of fucking heartbreak too. And you're talking about a guy who went in there and won 8-9 fights in a row, and who should have got a title shot based off those performances, seeing it all just snatched away from him. And it was a sight that wasn't a great sight to see. You could see the hurt and the disappointment as he was walking out into the back, and those are the breaks. And it's a cruel fucking game, this game, Harry, for at the best of times. Your thoughts on Beneil, and I'm sure you'll kind of echo the same sentiments as well.
100%. Beneil Dariush is like one of the best stories in MMA for who he is as a person, for how much he enjoys actually just fighting and being in that octagon, but also the change in who he is and what he's become, how he's maximized his skill set. We've got a loss to Michael Chiesa, rear naked choke. He then goes out and beats James Vick, who, was never really a fantastic fighter. He then goes out and beats Rashid Magomedov, grand. Then it's the horrific loss to Edson Barbosa. Everyone at that point was like, oh, I'm not sure if we want to see that again. He comes back and has a draw with Evan Dunham. Evan Dunham is no elite level fighter, at least at the time. Then goes out, loses to Alexander Hernandez in 42 seconds. And everyone's questioning, is the early stuff we saw from him, is that really, are we ever going to see the sort of level we expected? We've then got Thiago Moises, stops Drew Dober, stops Drakkar Klose, stops Scott Holman, has an absolute barn burner with Diego Ferreira, beats Tony Ferguson, beats Matoya Scamrot. And then there's one more he has to go before the title shot. At the age he is, at 34, I feel like we did Beneil Dariush a disservice by not giving him the title shot based on the merit of his performances up until that point. I'm not saying he would have beaten Islam Makhachev. I think it would have been a bit of a bloodbath, but the man deserved the flowers. The man came in and he was happy to have the next guy put in front of him to just prove once and for all that he is that guy. And he came up short, but he didn't just come up short. That fight was taken away from him just as Amanda Nunes took away the fight from Irene Aldana. Charles Oliveira beat Beneil Dariush on every plane possible. And it's something, I've done one interview now with a losing fighter, and that was with Sam Creasy. And it was one of my favorite interviews of all time that I've done, simply because the raw nature of what MMA was on show for everyone to see. And I think specifically somebody like Beneil Dariush, who genuinely feels like one of the good guys in MMA, deserves just as much flowers, regardless of the result, as Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, very, very well said there. And yeah, hopefully Beneil will be back. I'm sure he will. I'm sure he has a few more left in him. It'll be interesting to see. At this stage, it's probably looking less likely with the way things are heating up in the lightweight division that he'll get a chance at that title shot. We never know. We'll see. But if I'm being honest, it's not looking good for him right now, which is a real shame. But who is looking up and things are going well for is Mike Malott. I mean, we spoke about how he handled himself throughout fight week at the start of the podcast. And I think, it's easy to go out and talk the talk and walk the walk, but you got to go out there and perform as well on Saturday night. And he did just that. He went in there with the weight of the world on his shoulders and the weight of Canada on his shoulders, having all of his kind of fellow countrymen and women winning before, knowing that he had to win to maintain the undefeated streak for Canadians. Almost had a fucking 20 people fall on top of him during his walkout. I mean, crazy. But he went out there, and I have to... Sorry?
What happened there?
People. So as you look at, and I missed this because we were in the back room and Dan Ige was on doing his post fight during this fight. So I wasn't out there and I didn't even know that it happened until Sean had texted me, and I had to ask someone what happened and is everybody all right? And they said that just the crowd leaning over, you'll touch hands. You might want to fist bump the fighters coming out. You might want to just lean over and get your fucking mug in the camera just to say that you're on TV. This guy has done it before. And the barrier fell. The barrier just broke. And it almost fell on Malott. It was very, very lucky that no one was seriously hurt. They moved everybody from that section into other seats. And thankfully, they released a statement saying that everyone was fine and that safety is paramount. And that was a lot to deal with. I know someone asked Mike before or after the fight, did it affect him in any way? And he's like, he recognized it for 2 minutes, but it was all tunnel vision for him. And that was the team of the week for him. It was tunnel vision. He had the blinkers on. He was sure of himself. He was assertive. And he went out there and got the job done. Now, I've seen only snippets of the fight. I've seen a clip of the finish. I've not got to see this fight from start to finish. I will watch it eventually this week. But talk me through the fight and Mike Malot's performance over Adam Fugitt, who is not that well known, but is a tough fighter. He is a tough guy. And I thought he was disregarded a little bit after the loss, but Mike Malott didn't disregard him. He recognized him and respected him for the fighter that he was. But another clean performance from Mike Malott and another finish as well, which is very important for him and his move up the welterweight rankings.
Absolutely. He looked great. He looked like he welcomed the occasion, took the whole thing in his stride. Obviously, I wasn't there fight week. I didn't see him in person in those offbeat and in-beat moments, but he walked out confidently. He was in the check-in arena, check-in area, and he was just embracing, looking around, enjoying the crowd, steps up on the octagon, walks in, embraces the crowd before he goes in. And Adam Fugitt is a Muay Thai champion in ISKA, I think, or something similar, some affiliate body. And this is kind of where I was wondering where the fight would go, because Mike Malott, as we've seen, is an aggressive striker, really puts himself out there, really tries to push the pace. And so I wondered how Fugitt would balance that. From the Thai background, the Thai style is certainly something that allows you to be in those hectic situations and find your way through. But again, similar to Nunes, it just felt like Malott was never going to lose. Just the confidence that ran through him was just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. He chopped at the leg of Fugitt. His footwork was far better. His head movement looked good. Whenever he hit Fugitt, it looked like it was hurting him. The impactful strikes that were coming from Malott looked fantastic. And then in the end of the first round, you're questioning, like, I'm not sure this is going to go 3, but it looked like Malott was maybe going to overwhelm him on the feet. But obviously we got the finish with a guillotine. And I think it was Kenneth Florian that tweeted something out that they showed up on the broadcast, and he explained sort of the choke that Malott used, which is like a variation to an arm in guillotine, where actually Malott is using the choking arm is going high elbow, but the second arm, which is generally connected to the hand, is actually connected to like the forearm or the elbow to sort of prop up the finish. And I played with it in training, and I can confirm it's pretty fucking tight. It's pretty horrendous.
But are you when you're not gripping the hand, and if you're gripping the arm, are you kind of trying to utilize a little bit of shoulder pressure as well to squeeze down on the neck as well, just to kind of get that extra squeeze? Yeah.
So the mechanics are essentially very, very similar. So you're rolling your shoulder down the spine to force a dip in the cranium, a dip in the neck, and the high elbow variation with the secondary hand, you're essentially forcing the opponent's arm, the defending arm, into the choke to sort of reinforce your high elbow arm. It's, to be honest, I was impressed he pulled it off, because it's a finicky submission. It's obviously something he has in his locker that he's been practicing a while, but to hit it dynamically in the way he did and wrapping it up in the way he did was very impressive to me. Very, very impressive. And I'd be interested to see if he uses it again, because the thing with the high elbow guillotine is they're one of the more safer guillotines to throw in, simply because your opponent has to be extremely careful about where they move their feet. Even if they come to the quote unquote correct side to defend the guillotine, with a high elbow, you can still go to sleep. And so generally a fighter's going to have to take away one of their posts and throw an arm over the top of the elbow to take away some of the pressure. And obviously that allows you to start heisting, and you create space and do the things if you don't think you're going to finish the guillotine. And so I'm really interested to see if he uses it again, or what the variations are that he decides to use. But just a really, really clean, really, really good performance from Mike Malott. And I know we haven't done it for the other two, but I have some names.
Give me some. Give it to me, son.
So I think the name, if we're going to do this right, and if we want to start to build him now as somebody that can actually have some bones in this division, I wouldn't mind seeing either a Daniel Rodriguez, an Alex Morono, or if we want to push it just a touch more, a Santiago Ponzinibbio.
I can't argue with any one of those selections. It needs to be in that vicinity for sure for Mike Malott, because look at, he's 31 now. He doesn't have all the time in the world here, so he needs to make shit happen. And if they do come back to Canada a little bit later on in the year, maybe they can put him in there. Maybe they might put him as a co-main event or something like that with one of those bigger names in the welterweight division. It'll be very interesting. It seems, based off the performances, based off what he's doing, I would go out on a limb and say that Mike Malott has that star quality, and if the UFC can build him correctly, and if he has the skills to match those kind of tests that he will have down the line. Well, I mean, yeah, we could be off to the races. I would struggle to kind of put him at championship level yet, but I definitely think that he's capable of being a top 15, top 10 guy and maintaining that position as well. But it'll be interesting to see what happened. I know we didn't do it for the last two, but we basically said Charles versus Islam next, and the title is vacant there. So I think that conversation for the next women's bantamweight is just maybe a much larger conversation that we can have on another day. That was Mike Malott, Adam Fugitt, a very strong, astute performance. And I think the same can be said about Dan Ige, who went in there and picked up a unanimous decision win over Nate Landwehr in the 145-pound division. Ige out there, I spoke to him after the fight about it. I asked him about how important was the jab as the foundation of his overall game. And he said that, it's one of his best weapons. And it was on show again on the very early stages, and matched with a couple of big rights and big lefts as well. We can't look, even Dan didn't get to finish. We cannot deny the fact that Dan Ige went out there and tried to finish. And I'm going to kind of name drop a little bit here, but I have to tell this Dan Ige story because Spencer was kind enough to introduce me to Eric Nixick and to Dan Ige after the weigh-ins on Friday morning. And we were there just having a quick chat with Nixick. Dan was over there minding his own business. He was cooking some rice in the microwave. And I just love this. He walks over to me and he goes, "Hi, my name is Dan. I'm not sure that we've met before." And I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, don't freak out here. And I was like, "Hi, my name is Ian and just doing some media here." But really, I was like, I know who the fuck you are. You're Dan motherfucking Ige. Like that level of humbleness. I was like, holy fucking Christ. That was just kind of showcases the type of person that he is. I just really like that. I was really enjoying that interaction, and I wanted to share that with you as well. It was just the humbleness to say, I'm not sure you know who I am. I'm Dan. And I'm like, fucking hell, dog, I've been watching you fight for years and years. I know exactly who you are. But he went out there, Harry, put on a very, very good performance overall against a tricky opponent. But I think Sean and Graham talked about it on the podcast, and they were very right in what they said. Dan Ige just showed how much levels he was above of Nate Landwehr in this fight.
Maybe this is a controversial opinion, I don't know. I don't like these fights. And what I mean is not, Dan Ige looked unbelievable, but he was never going to look anything else you put this fight together because Dan Ige is a forward-facing fighter, pushes the pace, can keep that pace for 15 minutes, and is very tough, hits hard, has an expansive striking game, etc., etc. I understand Nate Landwehr has strung enough wins together that he deserves, of his own merit, a Dan Ige type name. But I think all going in, you don't have to be an astute analyst to understand that there are levels to MMA. And I don't think you have to be an astute analyst to know that one of Nate Landwehr's primary attributes is his toughness, is his durability, is his willingness to move through punishment, to move through strikes, to move through bad situations in order to get himself into advantageous situations. And so when one of your primary attributes is your toughness and it's not comparable to your skill, then we've got a matchup here that's quote unquote fireworks and it's going to be a quote unquote barn burner. But what that really means is you've got one dude who's considerably better, and the off chance of the other guy's toughness wearing the other dude down and him landing a big shot is what we're banking on. And so from a sort of a purely analyst's perspective, I don't really like the fight. But in its entertainment value, it was phenomenal. I had a great time watching it. You know, it was Danny Ige showing yet again that basics win fights. Basics allow him to build up to combinations. Good head movement allows him to build up to massive counter shots. And look, many, many, many humans wouldn't have been able to take the punishment that was dealt by Danny Ige on Nate Landwehr on Saturday night. Nate Landwehr, for good or bad, was able to take it. And so we got to see more of Danny Ige's repertoire. But again, from an analyst's perspective, I don't need to see fights like that, really.
Yeah, it's a fair assessment. I mean, I think the more important question to me is what's next for Dan, because I do feel he deserves a little bit more than being put in this position again as somewhat, maybe he likes the idea of being a gatekeeper, but I think he deserves another crack at top level guys in the division as well, for the services that he has in there. So, I mean, I'll take this fight for now, but if we're dealing with another fight like this again, yeah, I'd definitely be echoing those sentiments as well, Harry. When it comes to it, I think Landwehr winning 3 fights in a row is going to get him the opportunity to kind of come in and fight a guy like Ige, but I'd like to see Ige fight up rather than down in his next fight, and it'll be interesting to see what the UFC do with him as well. Go ahead.
The name is Bryce Mitchell.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, that would be a good fight. I know that him and Ivalev have been calling each other out, but I'd love to see Dan Ige get in there as well. A good winnable fight for Dan Ige as well. I think against either one of those guys. So maybe we could see that happen, and then maybe Dan Ige, he said he wanted to rest up for a little bit and fight again towards the end of the year. Maybe we could see that happen. The winner of maybe Mitchell and Ivalev taking on a guy like Dan Ige later on in the year.
More than happy with that. No problem.
Perfect. First fight on the main card was Marc-Andre Barriault versus Eric Anders. I kind of liken these two guys. I mentioned to Spencer, like, these two are two bruisers. That's the way I kind of labeled them to Spencer during the week. And it was a fight that was put on the card, or situated on a card where they wanted to go out there and get a bit of action. And they got a bit of action. Look, it was a little bit start-stoppy in the second round with the nut shots and everything like that. But, without being extremely, extremely entertaining, the fight still delivered, and it was good placement and there was good entertainment. There were some heavy shots landed. And I mean, it was great to see Marc-Andre go in there and pick up. I asked him after the fight, I said it was the first time that he got his hand raised inside the octagon since 2019. So it must have been nice for him to do that, even though he did come out and say himself that, he didn't feel like it was that, because he felt that, he had won the Do Who Choi fight. He felt that himself, that he had performed and done well against Joy Herbert, excuse me. That was, I'm getting completely mixed up here. I'm getting mixed up with somebody else. Forget what I said about that. What I did talk to him about, though, was his use of the right kick followed by the right hand. So it was a right body kick and a right hand, which hurt Eric Anders on a couple of different occasions. And I asked him that, and he said, yeah, he had been working on his coach on that exact kind of combination as well. And it paid off for him. These are two very stylistic, similar fighters, but it was Barriault who deserved the win and got it relatively easy in the end, didn't he?
Yeah, I just think with Eric Anders, we kind of know what we're getting. Not that we don't know what we're getting with Marc-Andre Barriault, but it feels like with Eric Anders, he's going to put a lot into round one. A lot. And then if he can wear you down enough that his gas tank is sapped dramatically, and if he can sap yours to a similar level, the next 2 rounds are going to be tough, because he can keep a relative portion of that same pace. But for Marc-Andre Barriault, I think he just recognized that was going to be the case, and he kept himself defensively sound enough in that first round, and then just proceeded to take the next 2 rounds pretty handy. And so I think Barriault is a far more polished fighter than Eric Anders. He's like Eric Anders 2.0, right? He has a similar enough style, as you've already said, but just has a little bit more smarts when it comes to his endurance, his energy output, and also the shot selection. So it was a fight. It happened. It means that Marc-Andre Barriault is now 3-1 in his last 4. let's see something else. Let's see something. That division is shallow enough that I don't really have a problem. Again, Marc-Andre Barrios 33, so it's not like we can hang around super, super, super long, right? Do we want to do Marc-Andre Barrios versus Caio Borralho? Do we want to do Marc-Andre Barrios versus a Joe Pyfer? Like, what do we want to do? I wouldn't mind seeing one of those types of names for him next.
I think he missed his opportunity to kind of stake a claim. He didn't do anything inside the cage. He was asked a couple of different times as well in the post-fight press conference about what's next, and he didn't really want to dwell on it. He's happy. He said he wanted to fight up, but I always feel in those kind of situations that you should have a name. Just say out a name and let's see what happens. And he didn't do it, but look, he'll be there. Hopefully he gets that opportunity. And that kicked off the main card. Headliner, Nasruddin Imavov, Chris Curtis was the headliner of the prelims. My simple assessment of this fight was that Nasruddin Imavov was en route to a really routine one-sided decision win here, with Chris Curtis, who just stood in front of him, similar enough to what we've seen with Irene Aldana, just standing in front of him with his hands up without any answers to anything that Imavov was offering. Couldn't get landed takedown, couldn't get any of his shots off. Imavov was landing the head kick, or was landing the calf kick, was landing nice straight right hands and the jabs as well, was in full control of this fight before an accidental clash of heads put a halt to it in the second round. What was your assessment on the performance before it was stopped from Imavov? Because I think it was a good performance, but Chris Curtis didn't offer all that much either at the same time.
Yeah, exactly the same as what you said, really. I don't really have much to add. I think Imavov is an interesting guy where he's young enough that he can still maybe take a couple of jumps up to a higher level. But I don't know, and we've talked about this, actually, you talked about this. I'm not sure that the camp he is in right now is going to take him to the promised land. Even in a division like 185, I think there are certainly sterner tests for him. And, we've sort of seen him in some of those sterner tests. But yeah, Chris Curtis, again, with no disrespect to him, his main training partner is Sean Strickland. And when you're in that sort of situation where Sean Strickland doesn't strike me as a guy that goes into training and the night before has been up for 2 hours thinking about the technical mistakes he made the day after and how he's going to fix them. And he needs Chris Curtis to be there so he can go in and be like, oh, well, actually, I put my hand here when I should have put it here. Can we drill this for 45 minutes? Or can we do? I don't see that being how the training sessions are going. And maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to be told I'm wrong, but that's not the impression I get. And so Chris Curtis will evolve at a far slower rate than somebody like Nasruddin Imavov, who we can see is already trying to fix the mistakes from his performance last time out. And yeah, I don't know. It was a fight that was, as you say, was going one way.
Fixing the mistakes, fair enough, he did kind of correct a few things, but it was pretty much the same Imavov that we've always seen. He was light on his feet. He had great distance control, was just pot shotting Chris Curtis away. There wasn't a level of aggressiveness there that I would like to see. You're coming off a loss. Go out there. And, it was pretty clear about 3 minutes into this fight for me that Imavov wasn't going to be touched by Chris Curtis. And in that case, what I would like, and this is me being selfish and what I'd like to see in fighters, is I'd like to see him put his fucking foot on the gas and maybe try and get Chris Curtis out of there. But I think Imavov would have been happy throughout that fight to just stand there at range and just pick him apart for 3 rounds. And, fair play him. If that gets him to the dance or that gets him a result, but that ain't going to get you too many wins against elite level competition in the division. And, you kind of, I've had my say about the MMA factory and stuff like that. It's that lack of maybe a difference of a game plan, or lack of maybe a want to be more aggressive, because I was as critical against Cyril Gane before we started get critical about his grappling. I was also critical of his lack of killer instinct. Look, we talked about Charles Oliveira and his ability to hurt opponents and finish his opponents, and we haven't seen that from Imavov. We've seen it a little bit with Cyril Gane, of course, but it's a real kind of an issue that's coming out of the MMA factory right now. And look, I don't know whether they want. I wouldn't like to run this fight back. I think we go with fresh opponents for both of these guys, and it was an unfortunate kind of incident. I mean, if you're a Mamov, you might want this fight again because he knows he's going to go in there and fucking put him away relatively easy. But if you're Chris Curtis, this fight is thrown on your desk. You're ripping up that contract. You're putting it in the bin. You're setting it on fire. You're pouring gasoline on it. You're not taking that fight if it happens down the line. Jasmine Jasovictus, Jazua Victus. I've called her probably 3 or 4 different last names on the duration of the last week. She got a win against Miranda Maverick in the 125-pound division. Not a great fight, really, Harry. I was watching this out back as well. Not really too much to report here. Only, Jazza Victus proved that she can hang in there with a level of opponent like Miranda Maverick, and her later on in her career she needs that push up the 125-pound division as well into stiffer competition to see what she can do. She showed great heart, great grit, and she kind of swarmed and swamped over Miranda Maverick. And kind of didn't give Maverick any chance to kind of implement her game plan in this fight.
I was impressed with Jasmine Jasdovicius, to be honest. This is a fighter that, as you say, has taken up MMA late and has come into the UFC and has had a little bit of ups and downs, and you can see that she's growing. And the test against Miranda Maverick was a tough one. Miranda Maverick is somebody that lots of people are still high on and is still showing enough of that prospect prowess, which is difficult in this division because it's shallow enough. And if you've got a bit of a name and you could do a bit of the fighting, you're going to get propelled quickly in this division. And I think something that we've seen with Miranda Maverick is that her, Macy Barber, and I can't believe the other fighter, and I've forgotten the other fighter's name.
Amanda Nunes.
Just beat Jessica Andrade. I can't believe I've forgotten her name.
It was Jan Jonen or Caitlin Chukagan?
No, neither of those. A younger fight. Anyway, it'll come to me. But
Erin Blanchfield.
Erin Blanchfield, thank you. I know she's 115, but it's not the same level. We all thought, these three are the same level of prospect, and they're not, and that's fine. There's absolutely no problem in that. But Miranda Maverick came in with a really interesting set of skills that I thought were going to cause Jasdovicius way more problems than there were. I thought the counter grappling from Jasdovicius was fantastic. Her range management was really, really good. And okay, the striking isn't super clean, super crisp, but she put a beating on Miranda Maverick, who, still was coming in and she's progressing in her own right. I agree 100% that we need to see Jasdovicius moved quickly through this division. This is a fighter that's 34 years of age, and if there's going to be a break into a considerable ranked opponent or something similar, we need to see it. I think I have a couple of names, but yeah, I mean, I was impressed with Jasdovicius.
I'll name one name first, and that is if Molly McCann or Meatball Molly can go out there and get a win next month. I'd like to see her and Jasdovicius maybe fight later on in the year. Who are a couple of names you'd like to see her in with?
So the reason I wouldn't go Molly McCann is I think Molly McCann is a fantastic name in terms of name value, but I also think people recognize the ceiling of Molly McCann.
Yeah, but it's a good, for me, I look at it not from a level of let's test my skills against a highly elite level opponent, but let's get a win against a ranked name, and then you're throwing yourself into the mix there. I mean, she would be a name that would be on the tip of my tongue if I was Jasmine going in and looking for her next fight.
So I think the two names I had, one is if we want to see a pretty stern test, and that's Lauren Murphy. That is a super grindy, super tough woman that can do a bit of everything, but also doesn't have time on her side. And so if Jasdovicius can go in and look anywhere near like she looked against Miranda Maverick, that's a fight that she can. This is a test of, can you build the tide, and then could you run somebody over with it? And the other one is Andrea Lee, who has a bit of everything, has shown improvements in her grappling, obviously has a striking background. And so for Jasdovicius, it's go in and show me something against the veteran that can do a bit of everything.
100%. Let's scoot through really quickly these next two. Ayman Zabi picked up a great knockout win over Rangilang. It was brilliant. I mean, that's exactly what you need to do on the prelims of a Canadian card. If you're a Canadian, go out there and get a fantastic left hook knockout. He was the guy. I mean, I was trying to fucking match up Marc-André Barrio there with Jai Herbert. He was the guy who was also without a win inside the octagon for quite some time as well. And he was the guy who was saying that, you know, he didn't feel like he had lost against the likes of Jai Herbert and the other guys as well. But he went out there and got the job done against Lang, and it was a great performance from Eamon Zabi, wasn't it?
Really, really good. The setup was absolutely fantastic. Came in and faked a takedown, even touched the leg. So the right hand went to the left knee, left hand went down to the right knee. And as soon as he touched, Lang took his right leg back. And as he takes his right leg back, his chest comes forward, and Eamon immediately comes up top and lands that beautiful left hook. Absolutely fantastic setup, fantastic knockout. That's a 101 TriStar setup for you, for sure.
Great performance by Eamon. Kyle Nelson also picked up a good win against Blake Builder. You have no thoughts on that? We're moving along, but we're definitely stopping at Steve Urquhart, who came in there on 8 days' notice and took out top 10 ranked David Dvorak by unanimous decision. And he didn't do it just by the skin of his teeth. He went out there and he proved that he can compete at this level, number one, and produced a phenomenal performance. I mean, I was blown away by this. It was unbelievable. And I kind of asked him after the fight, it was like, has it sunk in what you've done here? You know, 8 days ago, you weren't a UFC fighter. You've come in, and not only have you come in on your UFC debut, you've come in and you've taken out a top 10 opponent, and you've done it in impressive fashion. And he's such a down-to-earth guy. He was like, no, it hasn't really hit home, but you know, I'm glad I got the opportunity. He was supposed to go in there last month against Clay Carpenter. The fight got pulled. He went from supposedly fighting Clay Carpenter on his UFC debut at the UFC Apex to fighting in front of a packed crowd in Rogers Arena in Vancouver and taking on top 10 talent. And he went in there and delivered. He was the focus of your severe spotlight this week, Harry. Tell us why you made the decision to shine the light on Steve Urquhart this week.
Although Amanda Nunes did her absolute best to steal my severe spotlight, I watched this and there was just too many variables in this fight outside of the cage for me to not pick him after he performed like he did. Like I won't go too much in. Obviously, we're running low on time and stuff, but I just think any fighter that can turn around in 8 days, make weight, fly the other side of the world, and beat a top 10 opponent in the division as stacked as flyweight, you have all my respect, sir. But then the way that he did it, he immediately, and I think this is me maybe just being a bit anal and a bit philosophical about these things, but you really get a sense in those first 2 or 3 beats of a fight as a fighter settles into a stance and starts to move around their opponent, whether they can really fight at this level or not. And immediately there was a moment, and I'll just give this and then we'll move on, right? The immediate thing that happened was Dvorak came out in Orthodox, right?
I want to say, take your time and do this, because we're Daniel Belbita picked up a unanimous decision over Maria Oliveira. We're not talking about this. We're going to finish this on Steve Urquhart. So you take your time, sir. You take us through what you were impressed with.
Sure. So immediately Dvorak comes out in Orthodox, right? And so Usyk does a great job of just cutting his footwork straight up the middle, forcing Dvorak back, forcing him to see a right high kick if he went left, which is what we saw throughout, or to see a left body shot if he went right. And so Dvorak then says, "Oh, fuck this! I'm gonna switch immediately." Now Usyk hadn't shown any of that arsenal yet, but Dvorak was just feeling him out. He was trying to see what the level of footwork Steve Usyk had, and he switches to southpaw and immediately cuts an angle. Now that can be dangerous for a fighter that doesn't know what's happening, because if that angle comes and that footwork battle starts to be lost, you've got a mountain to climb. And as soon as he sees Dvorak start to stray off to his right and that right foot come forward, Usyk immediately resets and takes the outside foot battle. And I'm like, oh, fuck. We've got a fighter here. And not a punch has been thrown yet. But you've got a man who, as you said, 8 days notice, packs a bag, flies the other side of the world, makes weight, and is in here cerebrally aware enough, cerebrally ready enough on a pay-per-view card against a top 10 fighter in his division. And he's like, oh yeah, stance switching immediately inside 10 seconds. There's no problem. I got this. His motor skills show me a level of skill that just immediately I'm like, okay, fuck me. We've got a fighter on our hands. And then as the fight wears on, you can debate the first round. I scored the first round to David Dvorak. And I just think I scored it based on the leg kicks that Dvorak was consistently landing. But Erceg landed his own leg kicks. The jab started to motor on. He started to warm up into the fight. The engine started to go. And maybe he's a fighter that needs to take a couple of shots to get himself in. And that first round is sort of him turning the engine on and starting to move through the gears. Or maybe it's just the fact that, as we've said, he's on 8 days' notice on the other side of the fucking world on a pay-per-view card for his UFC debut against a top 10 guy. Like, who fucking knows? But the second round, he almost finished that guillotine a number of times. There are moments in there where Dvorak, you can see his hand starts going as if he's ready to tap, as if he's questioning in his own head, do I need to tap to this or not? And then, okay, the situation pertains that Dvorak survives and Erceg has to wrestle up and get to his feet, but he showed good wrestle ups. He showed good scrambles. The counter grappling was fantastic. At moments, he took Dvorak's back. Also noticed that he was too high on the back, and so wrestled himself back up into good positions. Smashes Dvorak with a really nice hand off the clinch exchange. And then the third round, his own leg kicks really come into the fray. And it was just a showing, as we always say with this flyweight division, but it was just a showing of fantastic, well-rounded mixed martial arts. But the thing that impressed me the most was those initial 15 seconds where you could have I could have happily given an excuse to be like, Jesus, UFC debut, UFC jitters, but it just didn't exist. Inside those first 15 seconds, a really interesting conundrum happened with David Dvorak, and Erceg just took it in his stride as if it was nothing, as if it was a day in the gym. And that, to me, is what, like, forget everything else that happened in the fight and all the good stuff that he did. That immediate moment of, I belong here, by the way, is ultra impressive to me.
And that's what I came across as well in the arena as well. You know, you felt that I was the same for you. It was like probably around a minute and a half, 2 minutes into the fight as well, where I was like, this guy is not just coming here to win. He's coming here to prove that he belongs in the elite level status in the flyweight division. And I'm glad he's there. He's picked up that ranking now. I'm looking forward to seeing. Let's match him up at Match Schnell next. Let's give him the fight that Dvorak should have had. And let's see what happens. # Fly Never Die. Check out Severe Spotlight on the SevereMMA website. Harry goes into great detail, always does, each and every Monday on the performer of his choice from every UFC card. You can see that over there right now and every Monday, like I said, on SevereMMA.com. Just before I go, I just want to say thank you to Shawnee, thank you to Graham, thank you to Harry, thank you to the whole Severe MMA team who helped and supported me in covering this event. Like I said, I can't describe what it means to me in words. Living the dream is one thing that comes to my mind. I mean, 3.5 years ago, I couldn't write an article, I couldn't edit, I couldn't do any sound, couldn't ask a question. And we put it all together and we did it on UFC 289. And, you know, we put the work in, but we support and we help one another at Severe MMA too. And before I start crying, I'm going to wrap it up and check out Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell, and check out me at O'Neill MMA. This, like I said, it was a pleasure and an honor to represent Severe MMA at this event. And hopefully I get to do it again down the line. It's a pleasure and honor to speak with Harry Powell here and break down these cards as well. We'll be back for the preview show later on this week. We'll be back next week to break down those fights as well on the Balance Breakdown. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and thank you for the love and support. It means the world to me and to the rest of us at Severe MMA. And we will catch you all the next